Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving deep into a document that's absolutely essential for anyone navigating the complex world of U.S. immigrant visas. That's the U.S. Department of State Visa Bulletin. We've got the July 2025 Bulletin right here, number 4, volume X11. It was issued back on June 3rd, 2025.
And this bulletin is really the official forecast. It tells us where the line stands for different visa categories for July. It breaks down this availability using two key reference points: the final action dates and the dates for filing applications.
Exactly. And our goal in this deep dive is, to cut through some of that technical language. We want to understand what these dates represent in real terms and pull out the most critical info you need if you or someone you know is waiting on a visa.
It really is the roadmap for who can move forward and when.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, this bulletin is all about managing those annual numerical limits that U.S. law places on immigrant visas.
Yeah, the cap set by Congress.
So let's start with those two core concepts you mentioned: final action dates and dates for filing applications. What's the practical difference? Why are both important?
Well, think of the final action dates as basically the finish line for getting a visa number authorized. For most people filing for adjustment of status here in the U.S. with USCIS, this is the date that matters. Unless USCIS specifically says otherwise on their website for that month, your priority date, which is usually the date your immigrant petition was filed, it has to be earlier than the final action date listed for your category and country. Only then is a visa number actually available to you.
Wow.
And consular officers abroad use this date too to see if they can actually issue the immigrant visa.
Okay, so final action means a visa number can actually be granted or used for that final adjustment step. What about the dates for filing applications?
Right. The dates for filing applications generally comes into play a bit earlier in the process. This is the date that consular officers use, mainly through the National Visa Center, or NVC, to tell applicants abroad, okay, you can start submitting your required documents. So if your priority date is earlier than the date for filing, the NVC basically says you're good to start gathering and submitting all your paperwork.
Okay. Getting the application packet ready, even if the final visa number isn't quite there yet. Can USCIS ever use these dates for filing for adjustment of status filings here in the U.S.?
They can, yes, but it's definitely not automatic. USCIS makes a separate call on this each month. If they think there are going to be more visas available for the whole fiscal year than the number of applicants who've already reached the final action date, well, then they might allow people in the U.S. to use the earlier dates for filing chart to submit their adjustment applications.
I see.
Which is exactly why checking the official USCIS website, that's www.uscis.gov visabulletin.info, is just absolutely essential every single month. You have to see which chart they've decided to use for adjustment filings. You just can't assume.
That makes a lot of sense, getting things into the system potentially sooner if there's capacity.
Yeah.
So how does the State Department actually figure out where to set these dates?
It's a pretty detailed process. It's based on the demand reported by USCIS and all the consular posts worldwide. That demand is then combined with the annual and monthly limits set by law. Available visa numbers get allocated chronologically based on applicants' priority dates. They just process applications in order until they hit the limit for a category or a country or the overall worldwide cap for that month.
And if the demand for a specific group is just higher than the available numbers?
Then that category or country becomes oversubscribed. The date you see listed in the bulletin for an oversubscribed area, that's simply the priority date of the very last person who could be reached before they hit that limit. Everyone with a priority date after that specific date, well, they have to wait.
And that waiting, that can sometimes lead to the dates actually moving backward. Retrogression, is that what it's called?
Precisely, retrogression. If demand suddenly spikes, or maybe usage in the previous months was higher than they thought, the State Department might have to pull a date back in the next bulletin. It's all about making sure they don't exceed those annual limits. In some, rare cases, a category might even become temporarily unavailable, marked with a U, if the entire annual allocation has been used up or they project it will be.
Wow. It's a dynamic system, really trying to stay within those fixed legal boundaries. Speaking of those boundaries, what are the overall statutory annual limits we're working with for this fiscal year, FY 2025?
Okay, so under the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA specifically Section 201, the worldwide annual limit for family-sponsored preference immigrants is set at 226,000. And for employment-based preference immigrants, the worldwide level is set at a minimum of 140,000.
Okay, so those are the total pies, 226,000 family, 140,000 employment, but then these are further limited by country, right?
Yes, exactly. Section 202 of the INA imposes per country limits. The standard limit for any single country is 7% of the total family-sponsored and employment-based numbers combined. So for FY 2025, that's 7% of 366,000. That's the 226K plus 140K, which works out to 25,620 visas per country. There's also a smaller limit, 2% for dependent areas, which comes out to 7,320.
And it's these per-country limits, that 7% rule, that's responsible for those sometimes drastically different waiting times we see for applicants from high-demand countries.
That's exactly it. Section 202E explains how visas get prorated when demand from one country goes over its 7% share, and the July 2025 Bulletin specifically lists the countries currently subject to this because they are oversubscribed: China mainland-born, India, Mexico, and the Philippines. When we look at the charts in a minute, you'll see this has a huge impact on the dates for applicants from these places.
Okay, let's dive into those specific categories then, starting with the family-sponsored preferences under INA Section 203A. Who falls into these groups?
Right, these categories are for people looking to immigrate based on a family relationship with a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, an LPR. You've got F1, that's unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens. The annual limit is 23,400, plus any unused F4 numbers. Then F2. This covers spouses, children, and unmarried sons and daughters of permanent residents. It's a big category, 114,200 plus any excess worldwide family numbers and unused F1s. And this F2 category is split. You have F2A, which is spouses and minor children of LPRs that get 77% of the F2 numbers. And importantly, 75% of those are exempt from the per-country limit. And then F2B, that's the unmarried sons and daughters, 21 or older, of LPRs. They get the remaining 23% of the F2 allocation.
Okay.
And comes F3. Married sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, that's 23,400 plus any unused F1 and F2 numbers. And finally, F4. Brothers and sisters of adult U.S. citizens, this gets 65,000 visas plus any unused numbers from F1 through F3.
Got it. So a clear hierarchy and flow of unused numbers. All right, with that structure in mind, let's look at the July 2025 family-sponsored charts. First up, the final action dates in Section 4.A. What's the general picture look like for most of the world?
Okay, for all chargeability areas except those listed, which, covers most countries, the final action dates for July 2025 are F1, July 15, 2016, F2A, September 1, 2022, F2B, October 15, 2016, F3, August 1, 2011, and F4, January 1st, 2008.
Wow. Okay, even those dates show pretty significant waiting times measured in years.
Yeah.
But then you look at those oversubscribed countries.
Yeah.
What are some of the most striking differences compared to those general dates?
Oh, this is where those per-country limits really bite. It's stark. For example, look at F4. We just said January 4, 2008 for most places. For India, it's February 1st, 2001.
Wow.
That's almost a 7-year additional wait just because you're chargeable to India. Or look at F3, August 1, 2011 generally, but for the Philippines, it's December 1st, 2003. And for Mexico, it's even further back, February 1st, 2001.
Goodness, that's a decade or more difference in some cases.
It really is. Mexico also faces a much longer wait in F1. Their date is April 22, 2005, compared to the general date of July 15, 2016.
Those differences are just huge. Decades, like you said. Now, what about those specific notes for F2A at the bottom of the chart? It mentioned exemptions. How does it work?
Right, F2A has the specific nuance because, as I mentioned, 75% of its visas are exempt from the per-country limit. The note clarifies how this plays out for July. First, F2A numbers that are exempt from the per-country limit. Those are available for applicants from all countries if their priority date is earlier than February 1st, 2022. Then, F2A numbers that are subject to the per-country limit. Those are available for applicants from all countries except Mexico if their priority dates fall between February 1st, 2022 and the general F2A final action date of September 1st, 2022. And lastly, it clarifies that all F2A numbers provided to Mexico are actually exempt from the per-country limit.
Okay, that's slightly complicated.
It is a bit. It basically means there are different potential cutoffs within F2A depending on your country and whether the specific visa number falls into the exempt bucket or not. But for July, the main all areas date of September 1st, 2022 kind of covers most situations once you factor in that earlier February 1st, 2022 exemption cutoff.
Right, so even within one category, these country limit rules add layers. Now let's flip to the dates for filing chart for family sponsor, Section 4.B. How do these compare? Are they further ahead?
Yes, as you'd expect, the dates for filing are generally more advanced. They signal when you can start sending documents to the NVC. For all chargeability areas, these dates are F1, September 1, 2017, F2A, March 1, 2025, F2B, January 1, 2017, F3, July 22, 2012, and F4, September 8, 2008.
Okay, hold on. That F2A date for filing is March 1, 2025 for all areas.
That's right.
That's significantly later, much more current than the final action date of September 1st, 2022. That seems like a big deal for F2A applicants.
Absolutely. That's a key takeaway. It means a large number of F2A applicants worldwide can get their paperwork submitted to NVC right now, even though the final action date isn't quite there yet.
That's great news for them. Lets them get prepared.
And for the oversubscribed countries, while they're still backlogged compared to the all areas dates, their dates for filing are also generally later than their final action dates. For instance, India F4 date for filing is December 1st, 2006. That's compared to a February 1, 2001 final action date. Mexico F1 is June 1st, 2006 versus April 22, 2005 final action. Philippines F3 is December 1st, 2004 versus December 1st, 2003 final action.
So it shows that window opening up, letting people prepare for when the final action date eventually catches up.
Exactly. It allows that preparation phase to begin sooner.
All right, let's shift gears now. Let's talk about the employment-based preferences. These are under INA Section 203B, based on skills, profession, or investment.
Correct. These are divided into 5 main preference categories. EB1, priority workers. This includes people with extraordinary ability, outstanding professors or researchers, and certain multinational executives or managers. Gets 28.6% of the total EB visas plus unused EB4, EB5. EB2. Professionals holding advanced degrees or persons of exceptional ability also gets 28.6% plus unused EB1. EB3. Skilled workers, professionals, and other workers gets 28.6% plus unused EB1, EB2. There's an important supplement within EB3 for other workers, those needing less than 2 years training or experience. It's capped at $10,000 per year. EB4, certain special immigrants, this includes various groups, notably certain religious workers, gets 7.1%. And EB5, employment creation in the investor category, also 7.1%. This one has specific set-asides now. 20% for rural areas, 10% for high unemployment areas, and 2% for infrastructure projects. The remaining 68% is unreserved.
Okay, and you mentioned that EB3 other workers sublimit. The Bulletin notes something about it being reduced by an older law. NACRA.
Yes, that's a detail in Section 5. The Nicaraguan and Central American Relief Act of 1997, NORCARA, requires a reduction of up to 5,000 visas annually from that EB3 other worker limit, once its cutoff date reaches a certain point. For FY 2025, the Bulletin estimates this reduction is limited to about 150 visas. So it brings the effective annual limit for other workers down just slightly, from 10,000 to around 9,850.
Another layer of complexity from past legislation affecting today's numbers. Okay, let's look at the employment-based charts for July 2025. Starting with the final action date, Section 5A. What's the picture for all chargeability areas?
All right, for most countries, EB1, its current Mark C. EB2, the date is October 15, 2023. EB3, April 1, 2023. Other workers, the EB3 subcategory, July 8, 2021. EB4, unavailable, Mark U. Certain religious workers, part of EB4, also unavailable, U. EB5, unreserved, current C. And all the EB5 set-asides, rural high unemployment infrastructure, also current C.
Okay, interesting. So EB1 and all the EB5 categories, including those newer set-asides, are current for most of the world. That's good news there. But EB4 and the religious worker component are completely unavailable for final action this month, for everyone.
That's correct. For July 2025 final action dates, yes. U means visa numbers just cannot be issued or used for adjustment of status in these categories for any country right now based on these dates. The EB5 set-asides remain current, likely because they're relatively new and just haven't built up enough demand yet to hit their annual limits or cause per-country issues.
Right. Now, the picture changes drastically, I imagine, when we look at the oversubscribed countries, especially China and India in EB2 and EB3.
Oh, absolutely. This is where you see some of the longest backlogs in the entire visa bulletin. It's quite severe. For example, India EB2 final action date is January 1st, 2013.
2013.
Yes, compare that to the general date of October 15, 2023. That's over a 10-year difference.
Wow.
India EB3 is similarly backlogged April 22, 2013, compared to April 1st, 2023, generally. Still about a decade wait. China also faces significant backlogs. Both EB2 and EB3 final action dates are back in December 2020, and China EB5 unreserved is also heavily backlogged, January 22, 2014, while the general EB5 unreserved is current.
Those decade-plus backlogs for India EB2 and EB3 are just really striking. It shows just how concentrated the demand is from those countries for those specific job categories. Okay, let's look at the dates for filing for employment based now, Section 5B. What do those look like?
For all chargeability areas, EB1, Still current? C. EB2, November 15th, 2023. EB3, May 1, 2023. Other workers, July 22, 2021. EB4, February 1st, 2021. Certain religious workers, also February 1st, 2021. EB5, unreserved, current, C. And the EB5 set-asides, also current, C.
Okay, this is interesting. EB4 and the certain religious workers category, which were unavailable for final action, they do have dates for filing listed, February 1st, 2021, for everybody.
That's a really key point, yes. Even if a visa number isn't authorized for final issuance yet, because final action is UMARDIS, applicants might still be able to get their documents assembled and submitted to the NBC if their priority date is earlier than this date for filing.
So it allows some progress, even if the finish line isn't visible yet.
Exactly. And for the oversubscribed countries, their dates for filing are also generally a bit later than their final action dates, offering that same chance to get paperwork moving. For instance, India EB2 date for filing is February 1st, 2013, just slightly ahead of the January 1st, 2013 final action date. Not a huge jump there, but it allows things to move incrementally. China EB5 unreserved date for filing is October 1st, 2016, which is actually quite a bit later than its January 2014 final action date.
Got it. Okay, moving on, the Bulletin also covers the Diversity Immigrant category, or DV. This is the famous green card lottery, right?
Yes, that's the one, governed by INA Section 203C. It offers up to 55,000 visas each year to natives of countries with historically low rates of immigration to the U.S.
And like other categories, that 55,000 number isn't quite the final number available, right? There are deductions.
That's correct. Up to 5,000 visas from that 55,000 are set aside for the NextEra program we mentioned earlier. And additionally, Section 5104 of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA for fiscal year 2024, introduced further deductions. So for the current DV 2025 program, the Bulletin states the estimated annual limit is actually reduced to approximately 52,000 visas.
Okay, so around 52,000 visas for DV 2025. How are those allocated geographically?
They're divided among 6 geographic regions, and there's a rule that no single country can receive more than 7% of the total available DV visas in any given year.
The Bulletin lists cutoff numbers for the DV program. What exactly do those numbers mean for someone who was selected in the lottery?
Right. If you were selected in the DV lottery, you were assigned a rank number or case number. The cutoff number listed in the bulletin for your region and potentially your specific country. If it has its own lower cutoff, that's the highest rank number that becomes eligible for interview scheduling and potential visa processing in that particular month. So if your rank number is below the cutoff number published for that month, you are potentially eligible to move forward with your case.
Okay, let's look at the July 2025 cutoffs then from Section B. What are they?
For July 2025, the regional cutoffs are Africa, 45,000. But there are lower country-specific cutoffs for Algeria, 44,950, Egypt, 40,000, and Morocco, 34,500, Asia, 9,000, again with lower specifics for Iran, 8,950, and Nepal, 8,950, Europe, 19,000, with lower specifics for Russia, 18,950, and Uzbekistan, 12,000, North America, which is just the Bahamas, 20, Oceania on 1,650, and South America and the Caribbean, 2,450.
And then for August 2025, looking ahead at Section C, we see those numbers advance.
Yes, they generally move forward, making more rank numbers eligible. Africa goes up to 50,000, Algeria 49,950, Egypt 43,250, Morocco 40,500. Asia advances to 11,000, Iran 10,650, Nepal 10,650. Europe moves to 22,000. Russia, 21,950, Uzbekistan, 13,000. North America, Bahamas, actually becomes current C. Oceania inches up to 1,700, and South America and the Caribbean moves to 2,600.
Seeing those numbers increase month to month must be encouraging for those waiting, but there's a critical hard deadline for all DV applicants, isn't there? This is really important.
But this is absolutely vital information, yes. For anyone selected for DV 2025, your entitlement to DV status, meaning your eligibility to actually receive that visa, it ends completely on September 30th, 2025. That date is the end of the U.S. government's fiscal year. Visas for the DV 2025 program simply cannot be issued after September 30th, 2025. And any derivative status for spouses and children also expires on that date.
So even if your rank number becomes eligible in, say, August or September, you must complete the entire process, either get the visa issued abroad or have your adjustment of status approved here in the U.S. by September 30th. No exceptions.
Exactly. No exceptions. And the Bulletin adds a very important cautionary note. DV availability through the end of FY 2025 cannot be taken for granted. Numbers could be exhausted prior to September 30.
Wow.
This means it's truly a race against the clock. Potential selectees really need to act diligently, complete all the steps required by the NVC and the embassy or consulate or USCIS if adjusting status, well in advance of that absolute deadline.
High stakes indeed for those lottery winners. Okay, finally, the Bulletin briefly mentions special immigrant visas, SIVs, for certain U.S. government employees in Section D. What's the key point there?
Yes, it's a brief note. It points out that the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024, which was signed into law back in December 2023, contains amendments. These amendments may impact certain current or former U.S. government employees working abroad who are applying for SIVs or adjustment of status under a specific part of the law, INA Section 101A27D. It could also affect their surviving family members.
And this note doesn't apply to all SIV programs. Specifically, it mentions certain Iraqis and Afghan SIVs are not affected.
That's correct. The Bulletin explicitly states this particular note does not affect certain Iraqis and Afghans applying for COU and SIA SIVLs. Those are separate programs. It advises applicants who might be affected by these specific NDAA changes under 101D to contact the consular section where they originally filed their application form, the Form DS-1884, for specific guidance on how the law impacts their case.
Okay, important to know which specific SIV program that note refers to. And finally, as always, the Bulletin points people to the official sources for more information, Section E.
Yes, and we really can't stress this enough. For the absolute latest details on visa processing operations at U.S. embassies and consulates worldwide, you always need to go to travel.state.gov. And, crucially, to confirm whether USCIS is allowing adjustment of status applicants in the U.S. to use the dates for filing chart in any given month, you must check isutis.gov visa bulletin info.
Right.
Those are the definitive official sources. The information there overrides anything you might read or hear elsewhere.
Excellent point. Stick to those official government websites for the final word.
They are the only truly reliable source for these month-to-month updates and, critically, the USCIS policy on which chart they are using.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into the July 2025 Visa Bulletin, what are the main takeaways for you? What should people really focus on?
Well, first, this bulletin is just a crucial monthly snapshot. It's driven by legal limits and real-world demand. Understanding the difference between final action dates and dates for filing is absolutely fundamental. And, as we just said, knowing which chart USCIS is using for adjustment of status is critical for folks in the U.S.
It also undeniably highlights the profound impact of those per-country limits. It really lays bare those multi-year and sometimes decade-long backlogs for applicants from high-demand countries, particularly in family and employment categories, compared to the rest of the world.
It really does. And for the DV 2025 selectees, while seeing the dates advance for August is good news, that looming September 30th, 2025 deadline is just the most urgent piece of information. Completing all necessary steps quickly is absolutely essential for them.
Yeah. Essentially, the Bulletin acts as a practical guide for people waiting in line, but it also paints this broader picture of the significant administrative and legal factors that govern who can immigrate to the U.S. and, importantly, when.
And looking at the scale of these backlogs, particularly for certain countries and categories like India, EB2, EB3, it really brings home the reality of that waiting in line concept. While the chart shows just numbers and dates, those represent years, often over a decade of, well, maybe separation from family, careers put on hold, deferred dreams, for potentially hundreds of thousands of people around the world.
That's a really powerful way to see the human element behind all this data.
It truly is. This bulletin isn't just some administrative update. It's really a monthly report card on the state of those aspirations tied up in the machinery of the U.S. immigration system.
Well said. That's been our deep dive into the July 2025 Visa Bulletin. We certainly hope this breakdown helps you make better sense of this complex but absolutely vital document.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.